Intrinsic value, intrinsic value.
Oh, I don't know why that gets me. I mean, I even listened to your lecture again this morning, and I mean,
Well,
I wrote it
yeah, I
down.
told
I've
you.
got
It's
my,
like learning a foreign language, right? They say when you dream the foreign language, that's when you know it. So at some point, the lights go on and they go out again, they go on again. So, okay, let me find you here.
ugh,
So don't beat yourself up. I mean, that's not helpful. So I guess what I'm saying, you gotta just kind of keep working until the lights go on, and then they go out again, and they go back on again, and then they go back out again. So you gotta keep,
I feel like happens.
Okay, so we're gonna be talking about the value of an option contract. Now, the first point
Okay.
that is really important for us is when we get asked about intrinsic value or time value, we're not asking about a player. We're asking about the relationship of the market price to the strike price. That's it. We're not asking you about what happens. I think, at least I think of the analogy of teaching my nephews to play chess. And, I got to be careful about when my nephews are asking about the game of chess or when they're asking about the player. So they say, hey, Uncle Dean, how does the game of chess end? I said, the game of chess ends with either checkmate or stalemate. And my nephew says, well, is that good news or bad news? I said, well, that's a different question. I say, at the end of this game, either both kings are alive, stalemate, or one of the kings is dead, checkmate. Now, if it's your king that's dead, then you are the loser. My sister-in-law said, well, that's the object of the game, right? Both kings live in harmony. I go, no, not the object of the game. The object of the game is to kill the other person's king. And my sister-in-law goes, that's so violent. I said, listen, you're the ones who let them play paintball. I think paintball is a hell of a lot more violent than a game of chess, but whatever, right? So you got to be real careful on an option question. More often than not, they're asking you about the player, but they're camouflaging it with the vocabulary or nomenclature. What I mean by that is, as I said to you, of these two things, intrinsic value is much more important for us because they toss that around like you close it out for intrinsic value. And, if you don't know what intrinsic value is, you're just going to be staring at the question. Now, when it comes time to attack this concept of intrinsic value, there's a lot of ways to attack. One is to simply memorize. Call up. If the market price is up from the strike price, we were looking at Apple a little bit ago. Call up. If Apple up 177 is up from 175, that call contract has intrinsic value. Intrinsic value and in the money are synonymous terms. They're synonymous terms, right? So that's important that you kind of know that as well. Put down. If the market price of Apple is down, if the market price of Apple is 173 and we're looking at a 175 put, that's going to have 2 points of intrinsic value within the money. Now, another way we can do this, can attack, is we can ask ourselves, is it likely to be exercised? Is it likely somebody wants to call away Apple at 175 when Apple's at 177? The answer is yes. If we answer that framing question, yes, that means the contract has intrinsic value. Is it likely somebody wants to call Apple away at 175 when Apple's at 173? No. If we answer no, that means the contract has no intrinsic value. Now, the reason that this is important is because if Lisa, I can end the question, not tell you whether the contract got exercised or not. In other words, I can make you figure out whether the Apple 175 call got exercised. If it has intrinsic value, the contract will be exercised. Maybe you're short the contract. You go, well, maybe they'll forget me. I said, Lisa, you will not be forgotten. If that contract has intrinsic value, the guy who's long is going to exercise. And if he doesn't, his broker will do it for him. So it's going to get exercised if it has intrinsic value. Is that good news or bad news? Well, it depends. Again, that's the concept of the kings, right? It depends on what you've done, whether that's good news or bad news. So you just got to be careful. Am I asking you about the relationship or am I asking what happened to somebody? Those are different things.
Okay.
Right? Now, if we answer no, then that contract has no intrinsic value. Is it likely somebody wants to buy Apple at 175 when it's 173? No. That means that contract, if that's the case, at expiration is probably worthless. Is that good news or bad news? It depends. Different question. Are you long or are you short? If you're long, it's your loss. And if you're short, it's your gain, right? That'll be a good thing or bad thing, depending on what you've done, right? So we're asking about the relationship of the market price to the strike price. So time value is determined by supply and demand. So the premium has two components. It has intrinsic value and time value. I think of time value as everything in excess of the intrinsic value. You know, I always joke, if you were a baby broker, that's not a derogatory term, it's a term of endearment. But if you were a baby broker at my firm, I'd make you write 1,000 times. Options are a wasting asset. Time value erodes. At expiration, the contract is only worth its intrinsic value. If the contract has no intrinsic value, the contract will expire worthless. If the contract has intrinsic value, it will be exercised. All right, so more time to value, the higher the premium, longer term options always have greater premiums. The more volatile the option, the higher the beta, the more it's going to have. So now we're looking here at Apple. As you can see, Apple has not been so well lately. When I made this deck, Apple was 194. But we're asking again, very important, we're asking about the relationship of the market price to the strike price. So call up. The market price is up from the strike price. So this Apple 190 call with Apple at 194 has 4 points of intrinsic value. It has 2 points of time value. I think of the time value as everything in excess of the intrinsic value. Now, again, please note, to answer the question, you didn't need to know whether you're long or short. If I just tell you it's a 190 call and Apple's at 194, the answer to intrinsic value is 4. And remember, in the money, intrinsic value are synonymous terms. All right, let's try some more. Let's try some more of this stuff. So let's say, boom, we're looking at a 40 call and the market price is 41. So is that contract in the money? Does that contract have intrinsic value?
1 point.
Right on, right? As we said, there's a lot of ways. You're correct. You could use call up. The market price 41 is up from the strike price. You could have used, is it likely that somebody wants to buy the stock at 40 when it's at 41? The answer is yes, right? So a lot of ways to get there. So of that 4 points, 1 point is intrinsic value, 3 points is the time value. By the way, I told you time value isn't important to that. But, you know, a different question, break even, bull, bear, that's a whole different thing. All we're looking at is the relationship of the market price and the strike price. Now here, I don't know if I did it on this deck. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Right. That's what you just told me. Okay. So now let's look. Here's 39. So now it has no intrinsic value, right? Because it's a 40 call. So here, there's no such thing, by the way, as negative intrinsic value. Either it has it or it does not, right? So here it does not. All right, let's look at a put.
Can we just go back to that real fast with respect to, because I see your note at the bottom that it does have time value on it of 4.
That's right.
So if there's no intrinsic value, then it's
zero,
still worthless, even if there's.
There will be no time value. At expiration, it's only going to be worth its intrinsic value. So that 4 is at time value is going to go poof at some point. As you get closer to expiration, that's going to be a declining number, right? So, all right, let's look at some Apple here. So Apple is and we're looking at, again, this relationship. So we're now going to be looking at calls and puts. And if we're looking at Apple and Apple's 194 and the strike price is 190, are the 190 calls, are they in the money? Do they have intrinsic value? Does the
Yes.
Apple, yeah, they have 4 points, right? How about the puts? The puts do not. For the put to have intrinsic value be in the money, it's got to be below that. And so here, the 194 is in the money, the 190 puts are out. If Apple is at 190 and their 190 is the strike, that's called at the money. And now Apple's at 188. Well, at 188, the 190 calls are no longer in the money. The 190 calls no longer have intrinsic value, but the 190 puts certainly do. Right? We're just playing this game. Boom. So here's another version of this. So we're looking at a 40 call. By the way, the long is there to mess you up. It has nothing to do with answering this question. So I'll help us out here. And I'm going to get rid of that because that has nothing to do with answering the question. Because all we're asking you is the relationship of the strike price to the market price. You know, what I like to do in terms of mechanics, what Dean likes to do is untestable. But what I like to do, I like to either on my official Prometric scratch paper is put that price either above or below my strike just to make my analysis a little easier. So I'm going to put my 45 up there. Right? If it was 38, I'd put it below the 40, just kind of compare where it's at. So my question to you is a 40 call with the market value of 45 in the money, at the money, or out of the money?
In.
You are correct. You are correct. Now, again, I'm doing you a favor here to get rid of the short. That short has nothing to do with answering the question because we're not being asked about the player. We're simply being asked about the relationship of the strike price to the market price. And so does a 40 put have intrinsic value? Is it in the money when the stock's at 52?
Out.
Excellent. You are correct. Now, remember, there's no such thing as negative intrinsic value, either has or doesn't. So don't tell me negative 12. It's simply a positive number or it's 0. All right. So let's try another one. Again, I'm going to get rid of that because it has nothing to do with answering the question. It doesn't matter whether you're long or short. We're not asking you about the players. We're asking about the relationship of the market price to the strike price. We're asking about the relationship of the strike price to the market price.
It's at the money.
Right on. You are correct. You are correct. A little trickier on this one. This next one's a little trickier. Oh, well, no, that's not as tricky as I thought it was going to be. Again, it has nothing to do with whether you're long or short. So is an 80 put with the stock at 60, is it in the money? Does it have intrinsic value?
It's in the money.
Right on. You know, what I like to do is just put my market price either above or below. Right, that's 20 points in the money, right? Excellent. Excellent. All right, we're playing the same game again. So we're, again, now it's a little trickier because now we're asking you, what is the intrinsic value plus the time value, right? So it's a 40 call. It's a 40 call. The stock is at 45. So the first thing we want to do is we want to compare the market price to the strike price. Does a 40 call with the stock at 45 have intrinsic value?
Yes.
How much of, you're correct, how much intrinsic value does it have?
5 points.
There you go. So 5 plus something equals 8. We said the intrinsic value plus the time value equals the premium. So what is the time value?
3.
Excellent. And so if you bought this, again, now we'll talk about a player. Let's say you're long. I say, Lisa, you're paying 8 points for 40 call. 5 represents the intrinsic value. 3 represents the time value. Your break even is 48. You got to have that stock be worth 48 because you got to have 8 points of intrinsic value to break even. You can't break even on time value because that's going to dissipate. It's going to go poof. At expiration, this thing is only going to be worth its what? Intrinsic value. So if this thing remains unchanged, it's still 45. You're going to lose $300. That's going to be going poof, gone. All right, so we're on the next one. You did a great job on that one. It's a 75 put, and the stock is at 77. So again, first thing we're going to do is compare 75 to 77. Does that have intrinsic value?
No.
That's right. So remember, that's a 0. So whatever this premium is, we're paying exclusively for the time value. There is no intrinsic value. So boom.
Okay.
So that represents the 6 points in time value, right? If I did the premium 6, there's no intrinsic value. Well, then that means this number over here is 6. The intrinsic value plus the time value always equals the what? The premium.
Premium.
Yep. All right. So let's look at our next one. It's a 30 put and the stock's at 4. Boy, if you see this one in the real world, give me a call. You would never see this in the real world, right? You never see that this premium is 4 and the intrinsic value is 4 because that just defies what Dean just told you, which is that there's going to be some intrinsic value. There's some time value, right? So here you're getting to buy this for the intrinsic value. What a deal. What a deal. You can call me. That would never exist outside of it, right? So that's just capital being jerks. 60 or below. So if it's 60 or below and it's a call contract, that means it has no intrinsic value.
No intrinsic.
So we're just playing this game of call intrinsic value. So let's just look at this one. So usually what this means is this slide is no longer one I cover in class, but we can still cover it because we're not in a class situation. So let's take our 55 call. The stock is 54. So does a 55 call with the stock at 54 have intrinsic value?
Yes.
Gotcha. Call
Oh, no.
Call up. For this to have intrinsic value, Jim would have to be above 55.
Oh,
Call up.
yes.
Call up.
Yes. Okay.
That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. Like I say, you're doing really good just until then. But that happens with options. Options are always like that. You're just gonna. All right. So let's try. Some practice questions. Let's try some practice questions. And we'll do ones based on what we've discussed. So here it says you buy an ABC January 25 call. I'm just getting that where I can see it at 4.5. The total premium there is going to be 4,500. And the break even is going to be 29.5. I'm trying to find ones that we've actually looked at. And boom, 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 boom. All right, I like this one. So here again, we got to be careful. When they ask us about intrinsic value, they are not asking us about the player. All they're asking about is the relationship of the market price to the strike price. Now, be careful. They didn't ask you what's the intrinsic value. That wasn't the question. The question wasn't, is the break even? They're simply asking in this question, below where does a 45 put have intrinsic value? Below 45. So what's all that other crap in the question for? It's just there to mess you up, right? It has nothing to do with answering this question, right? So they're hoping you go, oh man, well, now listen, if you thought it asked you break even, that was available to you as a wrong answer, right? If you thought it asked you what, again, so that's that RTFQ thing, right? All right. So now that we know that that's the answer, though, we could, as a bonus, kind of look at some of these other things, right? So now we can actually look at the premium, which is 4.25. And we said that the premium consists of two things: the time value and the intrinsic value. So the intrinsic value of a 45 put with a stock of 43, not what you were asked, but now I'm saying, let's look at that. It's 2. And so 2.25 represents the time value, because we said the premium represents that relationship, right? Now the break even here, they didn't ask that, would be 45 minus 4.25. I said, what we've got to do is we've got to turn your time value into intrinsic value, or at least you're going to be a loser. Because if that stock isn't 41 at expiration for 40.75, you're going to be a loser, because you will have not turned the time value into intrinsic value. Because as we get closer and closer to expiration in May, that time value is going to dissipate. Right? By the way, the opposite is longer term options would have greater premiums. Right? So that's what that relationship is about. Okay, so there, boom. I don't think we have any others here. Boom. Right, so I think that's pretty much it for our practice questions as it relates to intrinsic value. Well, that takes us right to our 2-hour mark. Any last minute things? What do you have else? I thought you said you wanted to add something else on your to-do list. Intrinsic value, time value. What else was it? I thought you had calculations. What did calculations?
It was bonds and things. But I
well,
can
remember,
set
let's
up
just
more.
talk about bonds. You're never going to have to calculate in bonds anything other than current yield or parity. Period. Full stop. Now that I've said that, Lisa, you might get questions on the relationships, not calculations, of the current yield, the yield to maturity, and the yield to call as related to the denominator. I'm not going to make you do any math. Remember, that's our teeter-totter see something. I got one. Let me just find that one first real quick. I'll show you what I mean by that. People say, Dean, you told me I was going to have to do this. And, here's a question where I got to do that. I said, well, do you really? Do you really? I mean, when you get a question, you go, I thought Dean told me I was going to have to do that. Is it really asking me to do this, or is there a hack or a shortcut to being able to do it? So let me just find this one here.
While you're finding that, I also would like to see if I could set up some time with you to do, I think it's the options exam with from Brian Lee.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great little exam. I'm more than happy to do that with you. So yeah, just book that. I think it's 44 questions. I think it's something like 44. So probably need like 9 minutes. We'll need about 9 minutes, but if we run over, I'll comp you that. You don't have to worry about doing that. It just depends how long we talk about it, but that's fine. So I'm more than happy to do that with you. Let's see. His questions are pretty good. They're a little tough, but that's a good thing, right? You want to stretch your mind and hope it doesn't go back to the same spot, right? So here's an example. Here's an example of what I'm talking about in terms of this. So here is an example. Oh, come on. Why did it do that?
I was looking at your schedule and I couldn't seem to find.
We got an existing relationship, so we'll find something for you. Were you thinking this week?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll just before we call it quits here, we'll look at that. What I'll probably have you do is just book it, and then I'll move it to wherever we agreed to it's going to be. Okay, let me see. Okay. Where'd it go? Here it is. Oh, let's try this again. All right, that's how it worked. Okay, so here's an example of, again, where you go, geez, I thought with it we were gonna not have to do this kind of yield relationship or do any math. And I said, well, you're really not gonna have to do any math here. You know, what we're looking at is the yield is 3.9 is trading at a premium. And so the way we go about this is we make our teeter-totter. What happened to my teeter-totter? There it is, right? And we say, okay, well, this is a bond at a premium. Boom, there's our yield. So we know nominal is going to be greater. So what we do is make a teeter-totter, and then based on that teeter-totter is how we answer that correctly. Right. So I think I have one more like that. Right. Again, this is about our relationship. Here I'm asking you which one of these bonds is trading at a premium. And it's bond C, right? Because the nominal yield is greater than the yield to maturity. So again, we would use the teeter. So it's mainly those relationships. All righty. So